200 engines, one hunted girl, and a bleeding boy who refused to step aside. At dawn, Eli stood alone in the road, heart racing, body breaking while a biker army closed in. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't ready, but he made one impossible choice. And in that moment, everything changed. The ground trembled before the sun even dared to rise. It started as a distant vibration, subtle at first like thunder rolling far beyond the horizon. But within seconds, it grew into something heavier, something alive. The air itself seemed to shake, as if the earth knew what was coming and feared it. Then came the sound. 200 engines roared in unison, tearing through the silence of dawn. Their thunder echoed across the empty highway like a warning from another world. It wasn't just noise, it was power, anger, and something far more dangerous than both: loyalty. Headlights cut through the early morning fog, long beams stretching across cracked asphalt and broken signs. One by one, they appeared over the hill, motorcycles, sleek and dark, moving like a single unstoppable force. No hesitation, no slowing down. They weren't just riding, they were coming for something, or someone. In the middle of it all stood a boy named Eli. He looked painfully out of place. In no leather jacket, no tattoos, no hardened expression, just a worn green hoodie, trembling hands, and a face too young to carry the weight of what was about to happen. He wasn't a biker. He wasn't a fighter. He was just a kid who had made one impossible choice, and now there was no turning back. The wind from the approaching storm of engines brushed against him, carrying the smell of gasoline and burning rubber. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it might break through his chest. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, but he didn't move. Eli's shirt was soaked with blood, dark and heavy against the fabric. It clung to him, warm and sticky, a constant reminder of how close he was to collapsing. Each breath was sharp, painful, like his body was fighting him with every second that passed. Still, he refused to fall. Not yet. Not while she was still behind him, just a few steps away. Hidden in the shadows of an abandoned gas station was the one person all those engines had come for. Lena, the outlaw's daughter. She stood partially concealed behind a rusted pillar, her breathing uneven, her eyes wide with fear. She wasn't crying, but she looked like she had forgotten how not to. Dirt smudged her face, and her hands shook as she clutched the edge of the wall, watching Eli like he was the only thing standing between her and the end, because he was. The world around them felt frozen in that moment, like time itself was holding its breath. Eli didn't turn around, but he could feel her there. He could feel her fear, her hesitation, her silent question. Why are you doing this? The truth was, he didn't fully know. He barely knew her. Just a stranger who had appeared in his life like a storm, bringing chaos, danger, and secrets he didn't understand. Anyone else would have walked away. Anyone else would have left her to face whatever was chasing her. But Eli couldn't. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him that first night, like she had already lost everything and was bracing to lose one more thing. Maybe it was the way her voice had shaken when she asked for help. Or maybe it was something simpler. He just couldn't let her face it alone. The roar of engines grew louder now, deafening, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. The motorcycles were close, too close. Eli clenched his fists, ignoring the pain that shot through his body. His legs felt weak, unsteady, but he planted his feet firmly on the ground. If they wanted her, they would have to go through him first, and even though he knew he didn't stand a chance, he didn't step aside. Lena was troubled the moment Eli met her. Not the loud, obvious kind of trouble, the kind that crashes through doors and leaves chaos behind. No, Lena was different. She carried her trouble quietly, like a shadow that never left her side. She had that look like she had seen too much and trusted too little. Her eyes were always searching, always calculating, like she expected danger to step out from every corner. Even when she stood still, it felt like she was ready to run, and yet there was something else in her expression. Exhaustion, the kind that didn't come from a long day, but from a long life. She was the kind of person everyone warned you about, but couldn't ignore. Eli first saw her just outside the convenience store at the edge of town. It was late evening, the sky painted in fading orange and deepening blue. Most people had already gone home, and the streets were quiet, too quiet. She stood near the flickering streetlight, her hoodie pulled low, her posture tense. At first glance, she looked like just another traveler passing through, but Eli noticed the details others might have missed: the slight limp when she shifted her weight, the faint bruise along her jaw, the way her hands trembled just barely before she shoved them into her pockets. Something wasn't right. Eli hesitated. He could walk past her like everyone else would. It wasn't his business. It wasn't his problem, but for some reason, his feet stopped. "Hey," he said, unsure of himself. Lena looked up instantly, not casually, not slowly, quick, alert, like she had been waiting for something to happen. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Eli saw it clearly, the fear in her eyes. Not the kind people show easily, the kind they try to hide, but can't. "You okay?" he asked. It was a simple question, one most people ask without expecting a real answer. But Lena didn't look away. She studied him, like she was trying to decide something important, something that could change everything. Then quietly she spoke. "Please," she said, her voice barely steady. "I need help." Eli felt his chest tighten. He didn't know why, but those words hit harder than they should have. "What happened?" he asked. Lena shook her head slightly. "There's no time. They're close." "Who?" She hesitated, and for a second, Eli thought she wouldn't answer. But then she said something that made everything feel heavier. "They're not my father's men," she said. "They want me gone." Eli frowned. "Your father?" Lena looked away, like even saying it out loud was dangerous. "You don't want to know," she muttered. But Eli already did, not the details, not the full story, but he knew enough. Someone was after her, and she was terrified. That should have been his cue to leave, to step back, to pretend he never got involved. People like Lena came with problems. Big ones, the kind that didn't just disappear, the kind that pulled you in and didn't let go. He could have walked away right then, gone home, forgotten her. But he didn't, because in that moment, standing under that flickering light, Lena didn't look dangerous. She looked alone, and that changed everything. Eli let out a slow breath. "Okay," he said. Lena blinked. "Okay. You can come with me." Her eyes widened slightly. "You don't even know me." "Yeah," Eli admitted. "But I know enough." "Enough to what?" "To know you need help." For a second, Lena just stared at him like she wasn't sure if he was serious or completely insane. "Why would you do that?" she asked. Eli shrugged, though his heart was already racing. "I don't know. Guess I just can't ignore this." Silence hung between them. Then, slowly, Lena nodded. That was all it took. Eli didn't understand the full story. He didn't know about Razor, the feared leader whose name made people lower their voices. He didn't know about the enemies, the danger, or the storm that was already forming. But he knew one thing: someone was hunting her. And if they found her, she wouldn't survive. So Eli made a choice, a simple one, a dangerous one, a choice that would change everything. He hid her, and in doing so, he stepped into a world he could never walk away from. For 2 days, they stayed hidden. It felt unreal, like the world outside had paused, holding its breath while danger searched for them in the dark. Inside Eli's small house, time moved differently, slow, quieter, but never peaceful. Eli gave Lena his room without hesitation. It wasn't much, just a narrow bed, a desk covered in books, and a window that looked out onto an empty street. Still, it was safe, safer than anywhere she had been in a long time. He took the floor. Every night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening for footsteps, for engines, for anything that didn't belong. Sleep came in short, broken moments. Every creak of the house made his heart jump. Every passing car felt like a warning. Lena didn't sleep much either. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Eli would hear her pacing softly. Other times, he'd notice the faint glow of light under the door, like she was too afraid of the dark to let it fully take over. They barely spoke at first. It wasn't awkward, it was cautious. Two strangers thrown together by something neither of them fully understood. But silence doesn't last forever. Slowly, it started to crack. It began with small things. "Do you always sleep on the floor?" Lena asked one night, her voice quiet from the edge of the bed. Eli let out a soft breath. "Not really. But it's not that bad. You could take the bed," she said. He shook his head, even though she couldn't see it clearly in the dim light. "You need it more." She didn't argue. After that, the conversations grew. Short at first, then longer. Lena never told him everything. She spoke in pieces, carefully chosen words, like she was building a wall even while trying to explain. But what she did say was enough. Her father had enemies, not just a few, A lot. People who had been waiting for a chance to strike. People who couldn't reach him directly. So they looked for something he cared about. Something vulnerable. Her. They don't want money, Lena said one evening, her voice distant as she stared at the window. They don't want power. What do they want? Eli asked. She hesitated. Then she looked at him, her expression heavier than before. They want to hurt him. Eli felt a chill run through him. And you're the way to do that, he said quietly. Lena nodded. That was when it truly sank in. This wasn't just about hiding someone. This was about standing in the path of something dangerous. And that danger was getting closer on the third night. Everything shattered. It started with a sound. Heavy, sudden. The front door exploded inward with a crash that echoed through the house like a gunshot. Lena froze. Eli was already on his feet. Boots pounded against the floor. Voices loud, rough, and filled with urgency cut through the silence. Search the place. They're here. Lena's eyes widened with pure fear. They found me. Come on. Eli didn't wait. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back door. There was no time to think, no time to plan, only time to run. They burst out into the cold night air, the darkness wrapping around them like a shield. Eli's heart raced as they sprinted into the alley, their footsteps echoing against the walls behind them. The shouts grew louder. They're running. After them. Eli didn't look back. He couldn't. He tightened his grip on Lena's hand and pushed forward, his lungs burning as they ran across empty streets and narrow paths. The town that once felt familiar now felt like a maze. Every corner held uncertainty. Every shadow felt alive. The night swallowed them, but the men were close behind, too close. Then Eli slowed. Something wasn't right. The alley ahead was too quiet, too still, and then he saw him. A figure stepped out from the shadows, a masked man, waiting. Eli's breath caught. There was no time to react and no time to turn. The knife flashed under the dim light and struck. Pain exploded through Eli's body, sharp, blinding, unforgiving. The world seemed to stop as the impact hit him, forcing the air from his lungs. His grip loosened, and he staggered back, his mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. He looked down. Blood, dark, spreading fast across his shirt. Lena screamed. The sound cut through everything, raw and filled with panic. Eli. He could barely hear her. The pain was overwhelming, crashing over him in waves. His legs felt weak, unstable, like they were about to give out beneath him. But Eli didn't fall. Not yet, because even through the pain, through the fear, through the darkness creeping at the edges of his vision, he knew one thing. If he fell now, there would be no one left standing between Lena and the people who wanted her gone. Eli should have collapsed. Anyone else would have. The pain alone was enough to bring a person to their knees. It burned through him, sharp and relentless, stealing his breath and blurring his vision. His body screamed at him to stop, to fall, to give in, to let the darkness take over. But something inside him refused to give up. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was adrenaline, or maybe it was the look on Lena's face, that fear, that desperation, that silent plea not to be left alone again. Eli clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay upright. His legs trembled, barely holding him, but he locked them in place like they were the only thing keeping the world from collapsing. The masked attacker stepped forward, confident now, ready to finish what he started. That was his mistake. With a sudden burst of strength, Eli lunged forward. He grabbed the attacker's arm, the one holding the knife, and shoved him back with everything he had left. It wasn't controlled. It wasn't skilled. It was raw desperation. The attacker stumbled, clearly not expecting resistance from someone who had just been stabbed. Run! Eli shouted, his voice breaking but loud enough to cut through the chaos. Lena didn't move. Her eyes were locked on him, white with shock and disbelief. I'm not leaving you, she yelled back, her voice trembling. You have to. Eli snapped, his grip tightening as he tried to keep the attacker at bay. Go. But Lena shook her head, stepping closer instead of running. No. For a split second, everything seemed frozen. Eli realized then she wasn't just scared. She was done running, done leaving people behind. That realization hit him harder than the pain in his side. In that moment, something changed. Not just in Lena. In everything, because suddenly the attackers hesitated. It wasn't because of Eli. It wasn't because of Lena. It was because of something else. A sound, low at first, barely noticeable beneath the heavy breathing, and distant shouts, a rumble, deep, growing. Eli felt it more than heard it, vibrating through the ground, rising through his feet, echoing in his chest. The masked man paused. Another attacker turned his head. The rumble grew louder, stronger. Engines, dozens of them, no hundreds. The sound rolled in like a storm, filling the night with an overwhelming force that couldn't be ignored. It swallowed the silence, drowned out every other noise, and sent a clear message to everyone standing in that street. Something big was coming. The men looked at each other, panic flashing across their faces. They knew that sound, and fear, real fear, began to creep in. Lena's expression shifted. The fear was still there, but something else replaced it. Recognition. My father, she whispered. The words barely left her lips before the street exploded with light. Headlights flooded the darkness from every direction, blinding and sudden. Engines roared as motorcycles poured into the street, surrounding them in seconds. There was no escape. In no gaps. In a way out. 200 bikes formed a circle of steel and fire, their riders silent but commanding. Like soldiers waiting for a single order, the attackers froze. Some took a step back, others lowered their weapons, because they understood exactly what this meant. See the center of it all. One bike rolled forward, slowly, deliberately. The engine cut, silence, followed heavy and absolute. The rider stepped off. A man, tall, broad, unshaken. His presence alone was enough to shift the air around him. Cold eyes scanned the scene, sharp and calculating. A deep scar ran across his face, telling a story no one needed explained. This was not a man you questioned. This was not a man you challenged. This was Razor, the leader, the legend, the one people feared even in whispers. His gaze moved slowly, first to the attackers, lingering just long enough to make them regret every decision that led them here, then to Eli. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Eli felt it instantly, the weight of that stare. It wasn't just a look. It was an evaluation, a judgment. Then Razor's gaze shifted to Lena. Something flickered in his expression. Not weakness, not softness, but something close. Lena, he said, his voice low, steady, and filled with quiet authority. She stepped forward, her voice shaking slightly. I'm here. Relief passed through the crowd of bikers, subtle but real. For a moment, no one else mattered, not the attackers, not the chaos, just that single connection. Then Razor's eyes dropped. To the blood. Eli's blood, dark, spreading, impossible to ignore. The air changed. Instantly, the calm disappeared, replaced by something far more dangerous. Razor looked back up slowly, his expression no longer unreadable. Now, it was clear, and it was terrifying, because in that moment, everything changed. The attackers didn't stand a chance. The moment Razor arrived, the balance shifted completely. What had once been a hunt turned into a reckoning. Surrounded by 200 riders, the men who had chased Lena now looked small, insignificant, outnumbered, outmatched, and completely out of time. Some tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Others dropped their weapons, hoping surrender might save them. It didn't matter. The storm had already arrived. Within minutes, it was over. The street that had been filled with chaos fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the low hum of engines and the distant echo of boots moving across pavement. But Eli barely saw any of it. The world around him was slipping away. The noise faded, first voices turning into muffled echoes, like he was underwater. Then the light began to blur, shapes melting into shadows. The pain, though, the pain was everywhere. It pulsed through his body with every heartbeat, each wave stronger than the last. His strength drained rapidly, like something inside him was slowly shutting down. He tried to stay standing. He really did. But his legs gave out, and this time, he couldn't stop himself from falling. The ground hit hard, but he barely felt it. Everything was distant now, cold, quiet. Darkness crept in from the edges of his vision, pulling him deeper, softer, like it was inviting him to rest. For a moment he let go. When Eli opened his eyes again, the world had changed. The sky above him was no longer dark. It was glowing. Soft shades of gold and orange stretched across the horizon as the sun began to rise. Dawn had arrived, calm and steady, like it had nothing to do with the violence of the night before. For a second, Eli didn't move. He just stared, breathing slowly, still, alive. Then he felt it. A hand, warm, firm, holding onto his like it was afraid to let go. He turned his head slightly. Lena was beside him. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes red from crying, but she was smiling. Not a big smile, not a happy one, but a real one. The kind that comes after fear finally begins to fade. You stayed, she whispered, her voice trembling but soft. Eli blinked, his lips barely moving as he tried to respond. Told you, he managed, his voice weak but honest. I would. Lena let out a shaky breath, tightening her grip on his hand as if to make sure he was real. For a moment, nothing else mattered, not the gang, not the danger, just that simple promise, kept. Then Eli noticed the figure standing behind her. Razor, the feared outlaw, the man whose name carried weight, whose presence commanded silence, the one people called a monster without ever daring to say it to his face. He stood tall, unmoving, his expression as sharp as ever, but something was different. He wasn't looking at Eli like an enemy or a stranger. He was looking at him with something else, something unexpected. Respect. You bled for my daughter, Razor said, his voice low but steady. Cutting through the quiet morning air, Eli swallowed, unsure how to respond. No one's ever done that. The words hung there, heavy with meaning. Eli didn't feel like a hero. He hadn't planned any of this. He hadn't thought himself brave. He had been scared the entire time. He still was. Eli started, then stopped, searching for the right words. But there weren't any, because the truth was simple. He had just cared. Razor seemed to understand that without needing it explained. He gave a slow nod, his eyes never leaving Eli. That means something, he said, and coming from a man like him, it meant everything. For the first time in Eli's life, something became clear. Courage wasn't about being fearless. It wasn't about strength or power or fighting back without hesitation. Courage was choosing to stand, even when your body is telling you to run, even when fear is louder than anything else, even when you know you might lose. As the engines around them roared again, this time not in anger, but in unity. The sound felt different, not threatening, protective, like a promise. Eli let his eyes close slowly, not in defeat, not in weakness, but in peace, because he knew, deep down, that something had changed, not just for Lena, not just for Razor, but for him. Sometimes, even the smallest person can step into the path of something much bigger and leave a mark no one can erase. And sometimes, a boy who bleeds in the dark becomes a legend at dawn. If this story made your heart race, if it made you feel something, fear, courage, or even hope, then remember this. Heroes aren't born in comfort, they're made in moments when walking away would be easier. Eli wasn't the strongest, he wasn't the bravest, but when it mattered most, he chose not to run, and sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. So ask yourself, when your moment comes, will you step back, or will you stand? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it, because stories like this aren't just meant to be watched, they're meant to be remembered.